Aramark Uniform Services is an innovative leader in infection prevention, helping IPs work with EVS to reduce the risk of HAIs. In conjunction with training EVS on cleaning best practices, Aramark supplies environmental hygiene products and uniform services to over 6,000 healthcare clients. From scrubs and patient apparel to an array of microfiber products, they are committed to advancing clean through science. To learn how they can help you clean with confidence, request a demo today by visiting aramarkuniform.com/healthcare or call 800-ARAMARK.
You're listening to the 5-Second Rule, brought to you by APIC, the Association for Professionals in Infection Control and Epidemiology. Together with our nearly 16,000 members, we strive to create a safer world through the prevention of infection. Join us while we talk to infection preventionists and other experts to learn the truth about some common myths related to the risk of infection and to get tips to keep yourself and the people around you safe from infection.
Hello, welcome to the 5-Second Rule podcast. I am guest host Marie Wilson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an infection preventionist and vice chair of APIC's Communications Committee. It's my honor to be in your ears for this short time. And today I am joined by my fellow committee member, Jay Liggins. Hey, Jay.
Hey, Marie. Yes, I am fellow committee member Jay Liggins. I use he, him pronouns, and I am excited to be back for another visit on the podcast. I always enjoy talking infection prevention, and I've really enjoyed over this past, almost a year now, Marie, getting to talk infection prevention with you.
Yeah, it has almost been a year. This podcast has been underway for longer than that, obviously, but those that are maybe just tuning in after a short break or for the first time, you're hearing us as we are through a transition state. The Communications Committee is taking a more active role in the production of this podcast, and we're just really excited to be here with you all today. And we are actually joined by another guest, not an infection preventionist, but a very valuable colleague that all of us probably have someone, hopefully, similar to this individual that we work with at our various institutions that helps us in our work as infection preventionists. Jay, do you want to introduce our guest?
Yes, I do. Today's episode is focused on environment of care, and our guest is a little bit of an expert on that, or has some experience. His name is Robert Carter. Robert is the Assistant Director of Safety and Emergency Management for Jefferson Health System in Philadelphia. In his current role, he manages robust programs in emergency management, environment of care, and life safety. Prior to this, he was a Senior Director of Process Compliance with Jones Lang LaSalle, where he directed facility operations, construction, security, EVS, and biomedical engineering. His experience has led to dozens of successful surveys with the Joint Commission, health departments, and local authorities having jurisdiction. Robert is a strong believer that interdisciplinary collaboration is critical to any safe environment. With this mindset, he has won awards in infection control and received recognition from frontline clinicians. Robert is also a veteran of the United States Air Force, where he served as a firefighter, medic, and fire inspector. So welcome, Robert.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. My pronouns are he and his, and I'm very excited to be here today.
The environment of care is such a broad topic. I think that we're going to have a lot to cover today, as many of us find when we're out doing that rounding. I will very likely refer to it to EOC, so I don't know if that's a totally common abbreviation for environment of care, but I didn't want our audience to get lost at any point if that does slip out. But admittedly, I will say, as excited I am having a little anxiety due to a recurring nightmare I have related to today's discussion. So this is something I've picked up in my professional tenure as a nurse and an infection preventionist, where just like little things of my daily job will creep into my dreams. And the one related to environment of care for me is actually unlaminated paper. It will be randomly throughout a dream that someone will come up to me in a frenzy and just like, oh my gosh, Marie, what do we do about this infection risk related to unlaminated paper? And all I can ever tell them is don't let anybody lick it. Just probably.
That's usually good advice.
Isn't it? I mean, just don't put it in your mouth. Okay. But that's such a small part of today's discussion.
Yes, it is. Environment of care rounding, I think to the forefront of everybody's mind is usually, oh my gosh, Joint Commission is here, or they're almost about to be here. We need to get ready. But environment of care is more than just prepping for Joint Commission. I think for me, what it means is, when you go receive care at a healthcare facility, it's kind of split into two buckets. You're getting one bucket, and one side of that care is the clinical care that you receive from the, physicians, nurses, all the healthcare working staff there. But the other half of it for me is also the care in the physical environment that you're receiving. An environment of care rounding, or EOC rounding, helps us ensure that the physical place that you're receiving care is safe, clean, and following all of the state and federal regulations, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Environment of care quite literally means the environment in which care is being provided. This is going to be our floors, doors, ceilings, walls. It's going to be all encompassing of everything we're going to encounter inside the facility, to include sometimes outside the facility, depending on the type of care. Important thing to note about this is it's a multidisciplinary group of people that are going to come together and provide this. We're going to have people from infection prevention facilities, EVS, oftentimes nurses who work on those floors, and sometimes nurses who work on other floors. It's good to bring a lot of people together on this.
Yes, it is a very, very large team. And with all those people in mindset in that team, that means we can do everything we can in 1 hour a week, right? That's it. That's all we need is 1 hour of rounding a week.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. 1 hour max.
No more, no less. I totally agree with you guys, your points about the environment of care. I think there's a lot of times that it may be perceived that this is related only to facilities or infection prevention because there are a lot of those regulatory standards that fall under the environment of care or IP chapters. And so they're like, well, that's their problem, right? And we know it's not. You guys have already done a great job of kind of introducing that. But I tend to be that person on EOC who's going around alone because the group gets so large that it's hard to kind of go unnoticed. And I have a personal philosophy related to EOC rounding, which is behind every door, open every drawer. I probably didn't make that little quip myself, but I definitely learned that lesson the hard way. I think, Jay, you referred to it as something else.
Yes, hospitals hide and seek.
Yeah.
Yes, that is how I view environment of care. Mostly because when I first started as an IP, I was notorious for always finding an expired item. Even after people have swept through an area, I would come back and be, oh, hey, we got some expired syringes or, some expired medicine here. We just looked in that area. Well, I was hide and seek champ when I was a kid, so a little bit of experience there.
I love it. You know what I heard someone do, and I've picked this up personally as well, is I will go up to a staff member. It's great to engage with these staff members during the rounding with your internal teams, right? Because who knows, a surveyor could walk up to them. It's just good to get them familiar with those individuals, the process, the questions. But one of the things I've heard someone do, and now I've done it, is take me to the thing you use the least. And so they'll take you into the supply room and they'll show you, I never go over here. And I guarantee that is where you will find your expired supplies. So I actually think I heard a surveyor introduced that trick to someone else one day that I then picked up. So it's
absolutely.
A nifty little trick.
I will be using that.
Check all of the tiny little closets that you otherwise might overlook. You're going to find medical equipment, that infusion pump that's been missing for 9 months, it's going to be in that closet, guaranteed.
That bronchoscope that was in a drawer for years. It doesn't even have the tracking system that your organization now uses for cleaning. Yeah, okay. Anyways, moving on. Robert, you're not an infection preventionist. You've got this great background related to a lot of things within the facility: biomedical engineering, fire and life safety, the actual facility management. So can you, just for a little more background, describe for us your past and present roles as they relate to the environment of care, and kind of the experiences that you've had along the way and the value that they've added to your work today?
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly enough, my first job in healthcare was right out of high school. I worked in EVS, quite possibly the hardest job I ever did. And I think the folks in EVS deserve a lot of our respect and recognition. I was incapable of performing in that role for very long before I realized it was too hard for me. So I made a switch to a financial counselor for an indigent care program. And then from there, I became an ER tech. I did that for about 3 years before becoming a firefighter in the United States Air Force. After my time was over in the Air Force, I moved into fire and life safety within the hospital, and then into facilities, and then oversaw other departments within that realm, like EVS and biomed and whatnot. Altogether, I feel like having dipped a toe in pretty much all of the support services, and also in the clinical side, barely, I feel like I got a pretty good understanding of how things work and how everybody utilizes the physical environment around them in their day-to-day jobs. This gives me great insight into what to look for and how I can better ensure a safer environment for patients, staff, and visitors.
You know, Robert, I'm really glad that you said it gives you great insight with all of the background and experience you have, because you kind of sound like a multidisciplinary team yourself, okay?
I was thinking the same thing, Jay.
You know, I think the only piece missing from your multidisciplinary team that is you is infection prevention, but I'm sure you're picking up bits and pieces as you round with your IPs, at your facility. And I kind of wanted to get a little bit more insight from you as well. What do you think infection prevention, in your experience, brings to the table for environment of care when we all round together?
Well, in my personal experience, they bring so much. There's a lot I don't know. I don't know what's bad to touch, for example. So it's nice to have someone with me to say, don't touch that. That's probably a bad idea. But honestly, it brings in a completely different point of view from, say, a facility side. I'm going to look just at the physical environment, and sometimes I'll overlook something that might directly touch the patient. So having that clinical side, that epi side, if you will, gives me a lot of great insight as well.
I will personally say that Robert is an excellent partner to have along with Environment of Care Touring. Candidly, we are past colleagues at a shared organization. And so I'm very glad to hear that he's enjoyed his time rounding with IPs, as I was often one of them. But, we definitely find that a lot of what Robert was looking for on the fire and life safety side, or more of the EC chapter standards as they are labeled through like the Joint Commission, overlap into the IP as well. And so there's a lot of times that we have to kind of go at an opportunity unified, right, in order to help the end user understand what we're trying to communicate and the risk associated with the observation or anything like that. But, so we've talked a lot about environment of care and the rounding associated with it. Obviously, that's the best way to understand the environment of care's current state and the opportunities for improving it to make it safer for the patients. A lot of that rounding is centered around being prepared for external parties to come in and walk through, or i.e. survey readiness. But right, that's not the intention of EOC. So let's talk a little bit about when the environment of care has maybe begged our attention outside of the allotted rounding time that was set up through that multidisciplinary team. Do you guys have any horror stories, if you will?
Begged our attention. Yes, that is a polite way of saying a horror story, isn't it?
Yeah, I think everyone who's listening to this podcast has at least one good horror story. But I definitely have a few. One that comes to mind, I was at a facility. It was my very first day at this facility within a larger organization of facilities. My first day, everything's going great. I'm getting a great understanding of the facility, the layout, the people. Later in the day, it was approximately around 3 o'clock. So at that point, we're starting to wind down and get ready for the end of the day. We get a call. There's water coming from the ceiling. This is one of the worst calls you can ever get in facility operations because it causes the most damage of almost any other call. What's more is the water was coming through the ceiling into the ORs.
That's fun.
That right there, we drop everything and we make a beeline to the ORs. Upon arrival, I noticed that it wasn't just coming down in one place. It was coming down throughout the entire operating room suite.
Oh, my Lord.
I'm talking multiple operating rooms, the clean supply rooms, central sterile. It came everywhere. And to make things better, this was sewer water. This was not happy water, as they say.
Yummy.
So this was a all stop, and the most horrible part about this is explaining to a CEO why you have to shut down the ORs. So that's definitely a big horror story for me. That required everybody to come together.
You mean you didn't enjoy that conversation, Robert, with the CEO?
Oh,
no, that wasn't.
No,
that wasn't Christmas morning.
Was it pleasant for you?
No. ORs make just a little bit of money for the hospitals, typically.
Yeah, I was sitting over here giggling, not because it's funny that you had that experience, but just I'm thinking that if you are an infection preventionist in a facility with an operating room, suite, what have you, procedure area, and you haven't had a water-related event, go buy a lottery ticket, because I think we all, Jay, do you have an experience related?
Yeah, no, definitely buy a lottery ticket, because my OR flooding experience happened within the first 2 months of being on the job as an infection preventionist ever. Not super familiar, being a new person, straight out of college, new IP on the job. I actually, one of the people who had hired me went to another facility within 2 months of me getting on. So I was alone at one of my sites. And there was a flood in the OR, just flooded. Came to work, found out there was a flood in the OR. And we, took care of everything. But when we first got the call, facilities director came up to me and said, "All right, we have a flood in the OR. We need you to tell us what to do because you are the expert." And 2-month-old infection preventionist Jay was just like, "Yep, yes, I am the expert, yes." But, we kept clean, separated from dirty, made sure we followed all the ICRA protocols, and we dried out the OR, had EVS come do terminal cleans on all of the rooms, and everything was set and ready to go. And then a couple weeks later, it flooded again. It turned out one of the backflow valves, or something that was supposed to stop it from happening, failed twice. And the fail safe when it floods was directly over the OR. So facilities ended up moving the fail safes out of the OR area. So if they failed again, they would at least flood a hallway and not the OR. So that's good. But within a month, my OR flooded twice within 2 months of being on the job. It was really fun.
I'd call that a trial by fire, but it was water.
Yeah. No oven here, just a boiling pot.
I want to circle back because though we're centering our conversation towards our infection preventionist colleagues, we recognize, there might be someone like Jay who is 2 months in, trying to soak up whatever knowledge they can. And so I kind of want to circle back to the types of water really briefly. The whole theme of today is environment of care, but water mitigation is a huge part of that for an infection preventionist. And so they're, just recognizing that there are different types of water that warrant different responses. So Robert was describing in his story the sewer water, which would be black water. Certainly that's going to have the highest precautions associated with it. Jay, I love how you talked about using your ICRA. I think a lot of people use those infection control risk assessments thinking it's for construction and renovation only. Well, you could assume that water mitigation is going to require some renovation to a degree. And so that's a great tool to use. I would also add in there that there are likely some local jurisdictional, whether it's state or otherwise, requirements associated with cleaning water mitigation, whether it's in a healthcare facility or otherwise. So you've got black water, which is that super gross sewage. You've got gray water, and then you've got clean water. So with all of them, you have to respond quickly. You want to mitigate the risk of any the horrible M word, mold.
Monday. She didn't say it.
Mold or mildew, potential buildup. But I did just want to kind of circle back to that in case anyone's wondering, like, wait, so what's happy water? The happiest water is clean, but it's never really too happy.
No. Happy water on a spill in a hospital is when someone's got a bottle of water that's never been opened before and they pour it on the floor. That's as good as it gets.
The tile floor.
About it, yes. Even if we have a rain leak and we live in the cleanest part of the United States where we're getting the freshest, cleanest rain imaginable, it's still filtering through the roof, through insulation, through ceiling tiles, through any number of things. So all water is going to be terrible for us. So it's definitely important to be mindful that water is bad in that regard.
I just have one other OR story that I'll kind of share. I'll share my little horror story, if you will. And it was a near miss, I guess you could say, in that it was a request that was not fulfilled. So I'm giving it away. But I remember one day, it was one of my first times on call, actually. And I think I was running into the facility super early. I must have been doing an in-service or something, but like in the 6 o'clock hour, like that's early for me as an infection preventionist. Though I recognize most of the hospital is awake and running by then. And I had a page from the OR, called them back. What's going on? Oh, we've got this patient with pulmonary TB that's coming in for who knows what procedure now. We need to get the air pressure flipped in the OR so that it is negative pressure. And, little me being very new, but having come from nursing, like I get TB patients need negative pressure. I'm like, I'm going to look into that a little bit first. And, I think, Robert, you were telling me, like, I'm not new. I've been in healthcare profession for more than a decade, but I've been infection preventionist for 7 years. But, I was like, can that even work? Can our air pressures even be flipped like that? Is that a thing? I think you might have been the one that helped educate me back then.
So it was a thing. It's something that used to be done a long, long time ago. And when I say a long time ago, my first healthcare job was over 20 years ago, and it was before that time. So it's not something we would do anymore. It's important to note that when you do have a patient that has tuberculosis, you want to take every precaution available. The best thing you can do is do this in off hours, provide whatever surgery or procedure for this patient. If it's an emergent situation, staff should wear appropriate PPE and just be educated that there's a patient with a disease that is transmissible, and education's the only real fix. So we're not going to switch the magic switch and change the direction of airflow in an operating room, because what that does is it introduces a lot of dirty materials into the surgical space. So if we're blowing out all of this air at such pressure that it's going to make the room positive pressure, it's also going to add contaminants to that area, and that's not safe either.
Yeah, we definitely want to maintain that laminar flow as best we can. Totally. Yeah, it was a question I'm glad I received, because I could learn the lesson and provide the right feedback before, you always want people to ask the question, right? Before just doing. Yeah, that's ideal in that situation.
Yes.
So
I will say I have seen the switch from when it was operable. They never demoed the switch at a certain location, and it was interesting to see in person.
What other, so we've talked about water mitigation. We've had a lot of OR stories. It makes sense, right? They're one of the most critical areas in most facilities. What other horror stories?
I have a horror story. Well, it's not a really horror story. It's kind of couldn't believe that was there, but it's kind of along the lines, Marie, of your behind every door, open every drawer concept. I was in the labor and delivery area, and they brought me to an area, like a room that was not often used. And, most facilities lock their sinks so you can't store stuff underneath it. And I went to just go, I've been in a habit, especially after this incident, to just check the sinks to make sure they are locked when I pull on them. Well, this one was not locked, and I opened the sink, and the pipe from the sink, since it was not a room that was in use, half the pipe was missing, but the other half was still coming out of the wall. And let me tell you, something was trying to connect the pipes together, and it was not another pipe. It was some type of thing that was coming out of the pipes. It was multi-rainbow colored something, and it was, I don't know what it is. We didn't culture it or anything. I felt like I needed a shower after I saw that drawer, so we got that and had a facilities come remove that.
Pipes corrode in the ways they do. Speaking of horror stories, I saw a pipe similar to that. It had completely eroded on the top part of the pipe, but there was never enough flow to where it would spill over. So the top half of the pipe was completely missing. Water would still flow through the pipe until one day something fell into the pipe from above and created a stoppage, and it simply spilled over the sides. Came out of nowhere.
That almost sounds like an art installation. That's so crazy.
Like an old aqueduct, open air aqueduct.
I've got one. It gets us a little bit back to the EOC rounding, but I think it's probably something a lot of our listeners can relate to, and it's the unattended medications, right? And what do we do? So I'll just preface this story with medication safety and management. If your pharmacy team is not involved in your environment of care rounding, get them there, because you've got the USP guidelines that govern a lot of what they do. They've also got a lot of their Department of Health, state jurisdictions, and other types of authorities that govern what they do. And they talk about awesome partners. I think pharmacists could rule the world, if you ask me. Behind infection preventionists, of course. But
important people, after all.
Yes. So I'm not going to go into too many horror stories about unattended medications, but one of the things, I guess it's not a horror story. Maybe we're getting out of that theme, but just something I always find, and it's always interesting to me, is when you've got a medication that's set up like for an emergency, right? I come from initially a level 1 trauma facility. And so you've got that trauma response set up. You've got your room. You never know when it's going to hit and that sort of thing. And it's really, it's always a bit of a mind tease when those things are observed, and making sure that staff can speak to what the process is, and making sure you've got the right staff member to speak to it as well, right? I was in preparation, I was actually looking for a resource related to this topic because I know it comes up so frequently. Infection preventionists are asked about it a lot, right? Because meds prepared ahead of time or unattended medications obviously have risk related to tampering or being spiked too long and allowing for some growth in those items without preservatives. But, the Joint Commission actually has standards, FAQs, or frequently asked questions, on their website to help interpret the standards. And they have one related to this, but it's actually currently under review, as of September 21st, 2022. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see, like, them actively, they removed their previous guidance and they've said on there, like, we're reviewing this and we'll be back shortly. And I was like, oh, good to know. But just a resource for our listeners out there to be aware of, that if you've ever got questions related to environment of care rounding and you want to know how to deal with them, going to that accrediting or regulatory body that is informing your institution, right? We're obviously, I think most of us here are most familiar with the Joint Commission. We've actually had the director over infection prevention for the Joint Commission on this podcast before. If you have not listened to it, oh my God, go back. It's the great episode. But there's plenty of other organizations as well. There's DNV, there's, I'm showing that I've only been at TJC organizations, but I know that there's others, and there's also others that will come in and partner with you for preparedness too. So you might be more familiar with those organizations and their resources. So, kind of let's move more towards the positive now, if y'all will. One of the things I love to see when I am rounding is that kind of Pavlovian response to my presence. People walking down the middle of the hall see me and just start like rubbing their hands together, insinuating that they're doing hand hygiene, but I'm like, dude, there's nothing on your hands, sort of thing.
We are the hand hygiene police.
Oh, yes. So I guess, one of the things I'd love to hear from both of you and your experiences is, how are you connecting with staff and like de-terrifying the rounding experience? What has worked for you?
Well, for me, Marie, I think for me, what's worked the best is always being on the floor every single day, rounding the hospital. It helps for me because I get to know the staff and the staff get to know me, and I'm not just a face or a suit, walking around the hospital. They don't equate me with, people that are out of reach or out of touch. They get to know me and my personality. And yes, I'm an infection preventionist, but I'm also a pretty decent guy to talk to, I think. And through us connecting interpersonally, we'll be able to actually just talk about what's going on in the hospital. How can I help you? I might not be able to, like, the issue you have might not be infection prevention related, but with EOC being multidisciplinary, I might know someone who can, and I can get that help as soon as I can for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. Attitude's everything. And you've got to go into this situation interacting with the floors that you're rounding with such a positive attitude, and that they instantly know that you're there to help. You're not there to say, aha, I gotcha. And on that note, when you do identify stuff, follow through. If they have an issue and they don't know how to correct it, help them find the answer. They will appreciate that. One other thing I think is picking the right team to do your rounding. I think it's important to have the right people present. Now, some may disagree with me on this topic, but I've rounded with groups of 15 people, and I've rounded with groups of 3 or 4 people. And I have to say, having too many people do the rounding can be overwhelming for the staff, and they may not view that as a helpful situation. So maybe limit it to just the critical people for that area. If you're doing an area that has medications, by all means, bring the pharmacist. Infection prevention should always be there. Facilities, EVS, certainly. But sometimes there's departments that might benefit from having security. There's departments that might benefit from bringing someone from clinical leadership. And sometimes it's even beneficial to bring new people. New nurses who have not really experienced a whole lot, don't really know why we go out and look for what we do. They just know that we do. And that gives us an opportunity to teach.
Yeah, I really like in bringing in elements of education, right? I do get asked a lot about unlaminated paper, and I'm like, oh, actually, that's more of a fire and life safety risk, and providing that education. I think the other one I get asked about a lot, or I notice, is corrugated cardboard. And when it's used, especially external shipping containers for storage, whether that's intentional or inadvertent, right? And so kind of going back to one of the things you mentioned, Robert, which was follow through, if I tell a clinical leader, you can't have that cardboard in here, it's so easy. And I've watched it happen where they look at anything that isn't like a rigid plastic box and go, oh, shoot, I can't have any of this stuff. And so it's helping them understand, no, and I'm talking about really the greatest risk is the corrugated cardboard with those little wedges, squiggles, whatever, room for the bugs to get into during transport, and helping them do risk assessments. Again, looking at the Joint Commission has a great resource related to explaining the risk of corrugated cardboard and external shipping containers. I think one of the other things too is, and you have to be careful with this one, is including pictures in the rounding report. I think you obviously got to be careful to not include that protected health information. Also being aware of who is around when you have your camera out. Some people are going to be rightfully so alarmed when they see a camera and might ask you questions. I actually love it when they ask me questions. I'm like, good. I want you to be asking someone that you don't recognize taking pictures what they're doing. But there's a lot of seeing is believing. And so I can try to be very descriptive in my terms, but unless they see exactly what I mean, I might have a slightly different name for the device than they do, and it just gets lost in translation. Pictures are really helpful way of kind of, I'm just showing you what I'm seeing, and let's find the solution together. I like to be the defensive coordinator when I'm out on EOC rounds. So that's what I try to tell people. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Also, explain why you're doing what you do. Something as simple as just telling someone the whys can go a long way.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't bring it up related to the environment of care. Our holiday decorations.
Yes, the Scrooge list.
Okay, let's all put on our Grinch filter. There's right ways and there's wrong ways of doing holiday decorations. The first thing I'll come out and say is having an inclusive space, right? Being aware of the various populations that you serve, even if the organization is centered in one way, continuing to foster an environment that is inclusive to anybody that may be walking through, not related to infection prevention or environment of care, but it's just important for all of us to be paying attention to. But I don't know, Robert, Jay, do y'all have any best practices that you've seen maybe related to holiday decorating?
Totally. Avoid Christmas lights that plug directly into the wall. Notoriously, they are the most dangerous cords available. So typically battery powered is the way to go. You can't go wrong with battery powered. 2, don't decorate your doors. We'll keep that as simple as possible. decorate other things, not your doors. We want to maintain the integrity of our fire doors. Fire doors are there for a reason. They enable us to shelter in place in the event of a fire. That way you have enough time to evacuate patients who otherwise would not be able to evacuate themselves from one zone to another zone. So don't decorate your doors. Let's maintain that fire rating. You put a bunch of paper on it and it will burn faster, and it will take away that luxury of giving you time to go from one fire zone to another. And lastly, Christmas trees. Christmas trees should only be in approved locations, regardless of organization. Christmas trees can be very, very dangerous. Real Christmas trees, obviously, if they don't get enough water, they become fire risks. Therefore, they are almost never allowed in any hospital. But fake trees need to be cleaned regularly in order to ensure that they don't get covered in dust. This is not just to make sure that they're clean. It's because the dust will make it a fire hazard, even if it is a fire-resistant Christmas tree. So clean your trees.
And now I will be dusting my tree. I don't think I've ever dusted a Christmas tree in my life. So
I don't think anyone, not a single person, ever.
But we're going to slow down on that because I don't want to talk about Christmas. We're not even through October yet. So we'll bring that back to Halloween. And I think people will probably start doing some pumpkin decorating contests. What are best practice methods for trying to do pumpkin contests? Should we carve them? Should we paint them? Should we have them at all?
Not recommend carving them. Obviously for a multitude of reasons, but we all know as soon as you carve your pumpkin, it starts decomposing. And we certainly don't want that decomposed material with close proximity to our patients or our care staff, obviously. What I've seen are some wickedly creative, like paintings, like diorama-esque kind of displays associated with pumpkins that were actually provided by the food services department. And so it was a fun way of kind of pulling everybody into this activity together. You've got your various departments that, lend a helping hand in decorating their team's pumpkin. But yeah, limiting it to the painting or adhesive, not puncturing the pumpkin, making sure that it can stay intact is going to be best. Making sure these things don't get set out in direct sunlight as well, or in a very warm environment. Just kind of some basic food safety considerations when you're talking about these decorations. And then also being mindful to kind of just looping back very quickly to what Robert said about the living Christmas trees or previously living Christmas trees. Obviously, anytime that we have living plants that are coming into our patient care areas, I'm in an oncology space, so of course this is my mindset. There is a greater risk for exposing our patients to a pathogen that we would rather not. Single spore of aspergillus is all it takes to be a deadly infection for some of our patients. So be creative in your holiday decorations. We are here to spread joy, not germs. Certainly making sure that you're continuing to have that fun and team building, and also just general bolstering of mood in the season as we go into the great dark. I'm in Seattle, and that's what they call the winter months, is the great dark. But, I say that again, Jay.
I'm going to say we might have to adopt that phrase over here in Michigan as well.
Yeah, yes, definitely. This has just been such a great conversation. Robert, it's been a pleasure to have you.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show.
Happy to have you.
Take care, Robert, and we'll speak with you soon. We've enjoyed getting to talk with you about the environment of care. Thank you for lending your expertise. But before Jay and I sign off today, we wanted to highlight some key happenings in the IP space as part of one of our new segments, Viral Content. So, Jay, what's a recent IP news story that sticks out to you?
Yes. So recently, the CDC updated the IPC guidance documents for the U.S. healthcare settings on September 23rd, 2022. There may be too many changes to highlight in this segment, but for our listeners who haven't reviewed the changes to the recommendations for patient management and healthcare personnel management, and I believe this is in regards to COVID-19, it is definitely worth checking out and ensuring your organization is prepared for winter with the latest guidance.
Yeah, I was reviewing it yesterday, and I'd like to highlight the guidance specific for nursing homes was archived to streamline and consolidate existing guidance. So setting specific considerations, not just nursing homes, dental settings are in there as well. They're now found in that main interim COVID-19 IPC guidance. So we'll be sure to include those links to all these updates in today's episode show notes.
Yes, and another piece of news for our members, make sure that you voted in this year's election for APIC Board and Nominating Committee. Active members should have received an email to the address that is linked with their membership around September 20th from APIC Election Coordinator. You have until October 24th to vote online. If you have not received the email or are having issues voting, review the show notes for today's episode on how to receive assistance.
Finally, this month, October, we celebrate International Infection Prevention Week. So
Yay.
So from October 16th to the 22nd, APIC is celebrating infection preventionists with the theme, The Future is Infection Prevention. As we continue with our 50th anniversary, we'll be exploring what the next 50 years will look like. So celebrate the important scientific breakthroughs of the past, the innovations of the future, and let's inspire the next generation of IPs to join us in our work. If you're listening and you are not currently an IP, this could be you. So the APIC Communications Committee has produced swag and a toolkit to help you celebrate with your team and organization. Visit the show notes for more information and join us October 18th at 12 p.m. Eastern for your annual IIPW Twitter chat. Join us by using the hashtag IIPWchat. If you're listening and you want to know more about today's discussion, resources are available on the webpage for this episode. Visit www.5secondruleshow.org. That's with the number 5. We want to hear from you, so please rate or review us wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you have something you want us to highlight in future episodes, email us at 5secondrule@apic.org. Again, that's with the number 5. Jay, it has been a pleasure sharing this space with you today. Thank you so much.
Always happy to be here, Marie.
Yes, so we're so appreciative of the hard work each and every infection preventionist and team is doing to make a safer world through infection prevention. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, and we will see you next time.